It's a percentage every year that matures.
Pinapahaba yung utang.
So just to be clear, 20% of the 5 trillion peso budget, that's what goes to debt service this year. And then you expect that percentage to go up next year and in the succeeding years. What's the ceiling, do you think? But judging again from your knowledge of seeing the debt payment schedule or the amortization schedule, where will it peak at? Do you think it's going to be like 25%, 30% of the budget?
There is no arbitrary ceiling. We expect debt service. You know, shortly after Edsel, debt service was in vicinity of 60%. And it was really huge.
Edsel what?
Edsel. When we say Edsel, there's only one Edsel. Edsel. The rest are surely Edsels.
Okay, thank you, Cong. I have another question, if I may. This is regarding to what Mr. Alcantara said earlier, regarding the speakership. Do you think you're expecting green light for mining moving forward? How will that help in terms of the industry?
Well, like I said, not a green light, but a reasonable process where we can increase the share of mining. The President has said this for responsible mining. One of the things that scared the blood of miners in the mining communities in the last election was there was a proposal that the first thing they would do was receive EO 130 issued by President Duterte, which said determined that mining could be an impetus for economic recovery. Mining is now only 1%, despite the fact that we are the fifth most mineralized country in the world. We have untold wealth out there that we will tap. So I expect that the DNR will implement responsible mining, accelerate it, and a mining project in 2 to 3 years you can make it produce already revenue. So I expect that we should go up. In the 70s, mining was good. Mining, sugar, and coconut were our main exports. And talking about budgets, there's been only 1 year where we had a surplus, 1974. I think there was 1 month under the Duterte administration where we had a surplus. But in 74, bago lang Marcelo, disciplinado lang ng tao. We had the budget surplus. So it can be done. It can be done with the right influence. So
yeah, just to follow up on that also, but President Duterte actually walked back some of the policies that were stopping mining already. So we already have some of the larger projects moving forward. So what else are you expecting from the Marcos administration to help mining, really pick up?
Well, maybe culturally, Ilocos is a hard-scrabble land, narrow strait between the mountain and the sea. So I'm sure the President-elect knows how hard it is to make a living. And so with that in mind, I'm sure he will push to make livelihood improve. Mining is one of those. I hope and I pray he follows up on that. He stated that in his campaign speech. So
what, like a more budget or more freedom, or what do you want from
bringing the people like Julian to bring more capital. Like I was saying, maybe we can look at the Indonesian model. They just passed a law that allows mining to be 100% owned, but with a time bound, in 5 years or 10 years, I know exactly, you must divest part of it. By the time they will have made enough money already, so that they can then, in fact, when they sell the shares, they will probably make a windfall also because it will be more valuable.
I think it's a mistake to talk about walking back from what the government did in mining. They didn't walk back to the old days. They opened up mining, socially and environmentally responsible mining. There were certain new regulations put into place, and so on. So the expression of walking back suggests going back to the old days. That's not the case. In fact, just recently, the department issued a departmental administrative order about guidelines for socially and environmentally responsible mining. So I think we need to look at it not as a step backward, but actually as a step forward to environmentally and socially responsible mining. That will also benefit your Thank you.
Sorry, I was referring to President Duterte actually allowing open pit mining.
No, I understand that. But that's not necessarily walking back if you have proper environmental and socially regulations. I mean, we've moved forward over the years, and then so it's not a backward step. That's an assumption, which is incorrect.
Okay.
That's actually a forward step. Because open pit mining is internationally acceptable. But in Australia and Canada, the two cleanest environment mining companies, there's a lot of open pit. They rehabilitate it once it's done. But that's where the big bucks will come from. It's so easy to mine, less costly for open pit, and you produce really much more revenues than underground mining. So to say that it's a step back is, I think, a misinterpretation of the objective.
I was just taking away some of the hurdles that they put in before, in the early part of the Duterte administration, when they put the ban in. Okay, so I have another question regarding revenue. Is that all right? There was a quote from a tax expert just last week regarding how to improve our revenues, and he basically mentioned that we don't need really any new revenues. We just need to improve the efficiency of the tax system. But one thing he said also, specifically, is the government or the people need a good example. And he said that he made an open appeal to the president to settle his unpaid estate taxes. So can the panel comment on that?
That is what we call improving the tax administration. And this will include, one, improving tax collection efficiency. Two, addressing the tax loopholes and nationalizing the tax exemptions. Three, you have to improve the policies on catching the tax evaders. Then you have also to address smuggling, which dilutes tax collection by about 250 billion annually. This was way back in 2018, to be more than. So these are all part of tax administration, and also you have to impose correct taxes from the rich, particularly those who profited from the windfalls of the pandemic.
Our friend there, can you come up here and properly introduce yourself and your media outfit?
I'm from the business bureau, and also with the NGO.
Yeah, are you Rene?
Of the name.
Yeah, okay. I have 2 points, one on mining, the other on taxes. Well, on mining, you see, in the 1960s and 1970s, the Philippines became the biggest copper producer in Asia. And in the 1960s and 1970s, Japan became the biggest world exporter of copper-based products made of copper coming from the Philippines. So my point is, we keep saying responsible mining. Is it not possible to transform that slogan into responsible, value-adding, job-creating industry, instead of just saying responsible? It's just, and we have seen what happened to Marinduque mines. You see, I was with Secretary Alcala. I think we saw the damage that was created. Is still happening. Anyway, on the second one, on taxes, you see, I think the incoming finance secretary is very lukewarm to the idea of imposing new taxes, especially for the ordinary people, and I think I like that. But I'm just wondering whether we can change the the language on taxation. Whenever they talk about tax reform, they always think of adding new taxes and collecting. Is it not time to review the taxation system, because it's very regressive? And so the way forward for tax reform should be transformed into a progressive one, meaning those who are capable of paying should pay more, rather than, you see right now, most of the taxes are the revenue is coming mainly from consumption. And our GDP is right now 75% consumption, thanks of course to the OFWs. Now, in relation to tax reform, can we add also this proposal of the Nagkaisa Labor Coalition and the Freedom from Debt Coalition? They advanced this last year, wealth tax. And maybe this is not the, wealth tax is not was articulated in 2020 at the height of the pandemic by the IMF itself, international. In one of their policy papers, they said a country should explore the idea of having a wealth tax. And then I think Italy already adopted some policy in relation to this. Now in the Philippines, in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, the super rich, according to one report based on the Forbes list, their wealth increased by almost 30%. And so, what is that? So, why don't we explore this idea of this labor FDC idea of having wealth tax? Because this incoming government really needs all the money for stimulus spending. Especially, he mentioned that he wants to reduce the price of rice to 20 pesos a kilo. He cannot do that without doing a lot of stimulation in the area of agriculture. Thank you.
To respond to the thing of mining, that's a big debate because we have one of the highest effective tax rate, Julian Payne, compared to other countries. So that is a disincentive also of mining. So the increase of taxes, like I said, the experience all over the world is cutting taxes stimulates business growth. And it's not just the big guys who make money, it generates additional employment. So, because the emphasis is on growth, the expectation is that more money put in the hands of the private sector will probably be used to generate more expansion in business, which means growth. So that's a big debate. Now, the wealth tax, that's a big debate in the US now, and in some European countries. France at one point wanted a 75% tax rate. So nothing has been resolved yet. Of course, the wealthy will go against it. But I don't know how the government will react to the proposal. It hasn't gained traction in countries like the US about the wealth tax. But that's really related to the net worth method, where if you're wealth increases so much, then you have to pay your fair share for that. With respect to, again, go back to agriculture, one of our problems in this country is good programs get put aside the moment there's a new administration. I tell you, the 11 industrial projects in Lagman were 200 megawatt Tongonan project was put up to support 11 industrial projects. Only 2 were put up, Basar, the copper smelting, and the field post for the fertilizer. We import 48% of all the fertilizer. And the copper, we don't do any processing, we all send it to Japan, Venice and the rest. But that was supposed, there was also a plan to put up an alumina refinery and aluminum smelter, but that didn't push through because it was put aside. I don't know if it's politics or what, but that would have been, if those 11 projects were put in, that would have helped manufacturing in this country. One other thing, people forget, if you remember Senator Masagana 99, the rice drive, it actually allowed us to have a surplus rice for a few years. You can look at the website of the UP Los the UP professors say it achieved increased production with a 90% debt collection in the support to farmers. But then, as it moved on, implementation got lax. The technicians were replaced by non-technicians. The supervision and collection went down. Collection went down to 35%, and production went down. But it was, in the words of one UP professor, it was a rousing success. So what is my point? If you put a program properly structured, properly supervised on a large scale, it can work. And now we're importing rice so much higher. Because I'm not sure, but I think you only do 20 kabans or per hectare, whereas Vietnam is anywhere from 40 to 60. And we have exactly the same kind of weather, but the policies are not in place. So maybe we should review the things. And what makes me hopeful is, that was a Marcos program, but it worked. It was put up in 73. And in 74, it helped give us a surplus because we did not import rice anymore. But it was phased out, I think, around 84 because the implementation had addressed it.
Sir, can I just call historical footnote? You see, in 1980, 81, 82, the World Bank and the IMF already came in when the debt crisis exploded. And 1978, 79, Jerry Sigat and Cesar Virata were trying to assure the public there's no problem about the rapid accumulation of debt, simply because the economy would grow, similar to what some people are saying now. And that the economy, when it grows, then the debt would be sustainable. But it did not happen. And so in 1980, 81, 82, the IMF, the World Bank came and they imposed these structural adjustments. And I happened to read a memo of Bong Tanco, the Secretary of Agriculture. He could not sleep in 1980, 81 because of the imposition of policy by the IMF and World Bank. Get out of agriculture, stop this subsidy. You see, the Masagana 99 you were mentioning was successful from 1973 to 79, mainly because you see, it was an integrated approach. You have this PNB providing credit, people riding on bicycles, together with the seeds, together with the little cash. It was integrated, and then you have Colorado Australia, and then you have this pre-cooperative. That's the success of that. But all of a sudden, it was cut by this IMF World Bank structural adjustment. Get out, and then 1982, Marcos launched this major industrial project, but it was too late. 2 decades behind Park Chung-hee that you mentioned, because Park Chung-hee pursued it in the 1960s and 70s. But you see, because then the IMF World Bank, Mr. Marcos, you cannot do that 11 industrial project. You have no money. And then the answer of the technocrats, well, we will have joint ventures. But so they collapsed, except of course this. You have the successful energy program of Velasco. And so the point I'm making is, in the 1970s, there was a streak of economic nationalism on the part of Marcos, but it was just a streak. He kept relying on these technocrats who kept borrowing. Then eventually, when the debt was unpayable, then the IMF and the World Bank came in and they started dictating terms. Remember that we went out of IMF supervision only under Gloria Macapagal in 2007. We are no longer under the supervision of IMF, but for 3 or 4 decades under the supervision of the IMF. Thank you.
think that's a very good point you raised, comparing the 1980s to the present. But I think the situation in the 1980s was that the debt to GDP ratio was much higher than it is now, and the reserves were, frankly, there were hardly any reserves. So the situations are not exactly comparable, in the sense that today, in 2022, the debt to GDP ratio is about 65%, which is quite different than it was in 1980. And secondly, the reserves are, I think, about 10 months reserves right now, which again is quite different from 1980. So I'm not sure it's good to compare the two and draw the same conclusions as to what would happen. Just a comment.
Well, you know, the success of some programs that are directed at growth seem to have worked, and we can do it again. Like any business, if the programs are not properly implemented, then it will fall out of the way. But you have to remember, in the 80s, the U.S. under President Carter had gone into a deep recession. And, you know, if the U.S. catches cold, the whole world catches cold. Now, if China catches cold, the whole world will catch cold. So it was a very difficult time for us. And we were, those were at the same time, the Argentina crisis, the Mexican crisis, not just us. So it's not fair to think that the wrong things were done. The situation was different. Now, at least hopefully China will bounce back and the US will bounce back. So it's a more positive environment for growth.
Which, with regard to the first point raised by Rene about responsible mining, it was saying it should be value-adding, job-creating, etc., etc. We export nickel, we export copper, we export chromite, all in the raw stage. I think the point there is to process this so that the ones who will really benefit are the Filipino people, because the value added from the raw material is much, much higher when we import them. So the ones that should benefit most should be the Filipino people. So should that be included in the definition of responsible mining, that the miner should not just rely on the wealth coming from the raw material, but must increase the value of the material.
I agree with you, Senator. In fact, as a former chairman of the Philippine Industry Association, we talk about it. But there are systemic problems that must be addressed. Number one, power is so expensive in the Philippines. We pay about 550 to 650 per kilowatt hour. Indonesia does 250. So they are now into processing and exporting. Number two, our nickel grade is a little lower than Indonesia.
I'm talking just one mineral, but like copper.
Yeah, all of them. Power is a major consideration because processing is power intensive. In fact, a processing plant will require you to sometimes put up your own power plant. Now, that has to be addressed. One of the things we discussed before was when you put up a processing plant, make it competitive. When they put up a power plant, give them incentive. No VAT on importations of coal or whatever. For the electricity sold to the processing companies so that they can sell it at a lower price. Let them connect to the grid and sell at commercial rates to the community, allow them to make a little profit. So those are systemic problems that have to be addressed.
But they're not insurmountable.
No. In terms of financing, if assuming this was to classify as a climate change project, not many people know that there is a facility in the DNR, loans, software for climate change, which nobody is available.
So we can explore that.
Yes.
We can explore that responsible mining should also include.
Processing.
Okay, Julian has something to say about that.
Yes, the concept of value added is a continuum. The mineral ore is in the ground, it has no value added if it's not taken out. The moment it's taken from the ground up or excavated, it's involving labor, value added. So at the moment you actually uncover the ore, you've got value added. In most cases, there's a second step of value adding, and that's concentrating it. Nobody ships out straight ore with little bits of gold in it. They break it down and try and concentrate. And it's the second stage of value added. What's being talked about is a very valid concept. There should be more stages, but there's many stages, not just and that. The second thing is, for the mining companies and all the investment companies to do value-added processing, to actually usually have maybe some kind of separate company. And maybe this is a place where we talk about a lot of capital in the Philippines available. Maybe it's available to do processing here. There's nothing to stop Philippine investors from investing in processing plants here to buy the ore directly from. But the mining company itself actually is at least almost always will use two stages of value added. It gets the stuff out from the ground, and secondly, it gets some degree of concentration. Both of those generate a lot of employment, it generates taxes, and it brings something to the Philippines. We could get more, but the question is who and how.
Yeah. Our friends from DMA Center, sorry, please come forward.
Good morning, sir. I'm Henry Stipuna. I come from All Nation Broadcasting Corporation. My question is on address to Sir Julian Payne. I think the industrial countries have outgrown already the responsible mining mantra. They have been already into responsible fund management in relation to gas and oil and mineral funds that have been sourced by the government from business. I have a friend, Miss Manila, who happens to be a country director of the Barrick Fund. It is one fund of the Canadian Oil Fund, which is now outsourcing here in the Philippines. So this is the investors' initial investment of 70,000. That means if I am investing to Barrick funds, I'm investing to Canadian Oil, and you can use the fund on your mining industry in Canada in exchange for a good rate and interest rates. Another one, I researched the world best fund management relating to gas and oil is Canada and Norway. I found one tourist here in the Philippines from Norway, and she said, I came to travel here because of my government's social amelioration from the gas profit of the king. It means that they are responsible fund management aside from responsible mining. How can we benchmark, sir, the Philippines? We have Malampaya gas, which is until now have been questioned at home.
What's your question?
Yes. We want to benchmark the responsible fund management in relation to gas and oil.
Bruce?
Again, like I said, I stay intermittently in Canada. They have what you call, Julian, an income trust fund, where even migrants can put money in. But the income trust fund is directed at developing and the income trust fund has a lot of incentives, I think tax, pensions, etc. That puts together the fund. Maybe that's something that we can look at here, but it is through the financial institutions, so that gives confidence in the investor. But I still believe that there's enough capital lying around in the Philippines, it's just a little shy. So if that's the case, then maybe we can allow investors to put in funds like that. The returns are very good in the income trust fund. And a lot of people invested in it. it was directed to be invested in things like mining. I don't think it's fair to benchmark us because we don't have the wealth of oil from Norway or the wealth of Canada from mining. And most of the population is just trying to get by. So I'm not sure that we can say that the Philippines should also do like Canada.
Yeah, I would like to invite to my office. I am doing a freelance PR to my company, who happens to be, we have been awarded by President Duterte a certain cousin of deposit in Mindanao. But we are, of course, need capital.
You can give your qualified to the people.
Another question, sir. This one is not so sexy for you men to answer. Another business line that we have is into health and wellness. It's like a counterpart of Department of Natural Health. It is very famous in Canada. The practicing of naturopathy. Naturopathy. In fact, the headquarters of World Confederation of Naturopathy is based in Toronto, Canada. We just have an international congress, but it was hosted by Slovenia. Now in the Philippines, it is a sunshine industry, one of the affiliates of Department of Tourism. That the resort type, sir. But it's health and wellness, the traditional, like the Hilo, the Lintusa, it's being regulated by Department of Health under the non-medical. We have the record for this. My question is, and in fact I have proposal with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and reply. My boss ran for Congress, the ASAP 144, advocating for the Philippines to have a Department of Natural Health, CAPMI in Canada.
What's your question?
The question is, how can we, the Philippines, rebrand the health and wellness industry? Whether it be a capital, UK based, which is a breakfast, or
We will have another session for that. No?
it's not so sexy, but at least I try.
Okay, yes. We will include that in one of the topics that we will have in the coming Kapihan.
Thank you.
We have other friends. Thank you. That's our friend from social media. Do we have questions from our friends from the business world? Newspaper, Reddit? Please come forward, please.
Hello sir, I'm Arun Abdulaya from Kapihan. Sir, about the Edsel, we know that it is made para po to invite more foreign investors. So because of this, they can have potentially more income for their companies. How can we make sure that this income will be reinvested in the Philippines so that the money would circulate instead of them keeping it and investing it in other countries?
Can you repeat it again?
The Edsel, yes.
Talking about the create law.
Yes, I mean, it is made, I believe, for foreign investors to
Repatriation and reinvestment, we make sure that the profit is also invested, something like that.
Well, the create law is actually an incentive. It lowered taxes. It made it easier. In fact, one of the bottlenecks before was you had to get the approval for any merger or things like that. There's a lot of pending items there. Now, if you comply, you don't need to go to BIR anymore. Now, on the repatriation, intrinsically, if your retained earnings reach a certain limit, then you have to either reinvest it or you get taxed. So that's a way of ensuring that the government takes something from it. Now, the purpose of the national law on limitations is to make sure that part of it is local capital, Filipinos. But again, you have to balance that because there's a dearth of local capital. You may have, again, like I said, allow them to come in after some point, when the business is stable making money, then you sell it to the stock market or the locals, so that the Filipinos then start benefiting by themselves. So it's not a zero-sum game. There has to be some game so that you can take a little later. But you have to get them in first into the country.
Yes, thank you, sir. Another question, sir, for Mr. Julian. You said a while ago that the RCEP about opening free trade, it can give, it can open the Philippines to more markets. How about the local producers? It means more competition for them. So some of them are complaining because it would force them to lower their prices and somehow get malugit sila.
That's a good question. I won't use RCEP because Canada is not a member of RCEP. I'll use another free trade agreement. If it were to be Canada-ASEAN free trade, it would mean that basically Philippine products can enter Canada without virtually any tariff. Right now they have to pay a tariff. Right now, so basically it's not a one-way street. A free trade agreement allows Filipinos to trade to the other country at lower or no tariff, and vice versa. So it actually provides opportunities for those who are competitive. Right now, if you don't have a free trade agreement, Philippines is at a disadvantage in trading to Canada because you have to pay a tariff, which Indonesia or Malaysia or the Philippines or Thailand doesn't. So that's one thing. Now, yes, but most of there's not that many tariffs in the way. And we've done studies, and for example, there is right now no free trade agreement that covers the Philippines and Canada. None, zero. If there were one, whether it was a CTPP, or whether it was a Canada-ASEAN free trade agreement, or whether it was a bilateral Philippine-Canada treaty, then the Philippines actually benefit as much as Canada. So it's a two-way street, two-way door. Now, the inefficient companies in Canada and in the Philippines will suffer. The efficient companies will make money, and they will compete more successfully against the competitors in Indonesia, Vietnam, and these other places, where right now you are at a disadvantage. That's the issue of free trade agreements. Okay, it's not just a one-way. But there is a cost. If you're inefficient and you're not competitive, too bad. But the others will become more competitive because they won't be facing the same tariffs in Canada.
Yeah, we will have the last question.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Sir, about the, let's say, Build program, what do you think is the better way of funding it? Is it ODA or public-private partnership?
PPP. PPP?
Yes, PPP or ODA.
Funding the build. Is it ODA or direct government spending or PPP?
Well, direct government spending is pump priming the economy, which is important when the economy is down. I think the BBM program, the stimulus is supposed to do that, to immediately pump prime the economy to grow. Anything that is equity, like the PPP, is better than debt for any business. ODAs are treaty, there's soft loans, low rates, etc. But you have to make sure that projects are there because we're paying a lot of commitment fees for ODAs that are never spent. And that's why the DBM is important because they have to coordinate with the other government agencies so that when we sign ODAs, it goes to an implementation right away. Because if you look at the government, in the past administrations, we were paying fees for nothing because they were never paid. Let me give you one example. Many years ago, when I was in banking, we had a private textile industry. The World Bank gave us $120 million loan for textile millers to modernize. Thailand did the same. In Thailand, they completely obeyed to implement modernization. I don't think the 120 million for the Philippines was never available. So we don't have a textile industry now. So that's a problem with ODAs. And in the DNR, there is a program now, ODA, for climate change, which can be used for projects, including a bamboo plantation. Until now, I understand there has been no agreement. So implementation is very important, and that is why the lineup of people that President-elect Bongbong has put in place gives me hope, because these are experienced people with track records. So, like any business, people are critical. Whatever you say, the implementation is critical. So the people he has appointed so far, so good. Maybe things can improve.
Thank you, our friend from social media, and that will be the last. So can we ask for parting shots from our guests?
Well, it's 11:40. Congressman Edsel, you mentioned about the stimulus package that is not included in the 2022 budget, and therefore there may be some problem financing this stimulus package. Is the incoming administration, based on what you have heard, interested in pursuing this additional stimulus package?
Well, they have not withdrawn the idea of having stimulus package, which they have monitored as BBM. But I think they have not told the public how they're going to fund that stimulus package. There are certain constitutional restraints because the stimulus package is supposed to be a special budget or a supplemental budget, supplemental to the DAA, and then that is the national treasury would have to certify that funds are available, or in the stimulus package there is a revenue measure being proposed. But in order to avoid this constitutional requirement, the stimulus package can be embedded in the 2023 General Appropriations Act, where there is no requirement with respect to availability of funds or the new tax measure. But we will have to wait, the government will have to wait for another 6 months before the stimulus package is put in place. But meanwhile, considering that 90% of the government is still released, that would have the effect of a stimulus package, because in that budget release, we have the infrastructure program, we have the build initiative, as well as adequate funds to address the remaining pandemic problems.
Your parting words.
Well, we are hoping for the best, and I hope that the new government would be able to address these fiscal and economic problems, as well as some of the negative legacy it is inherited from the country administration.
Julian?
Thank you. I first came to the Philippines in 1989 for a visit. I was Vice President He from CEDA. I came to live here in 94. This country has come a long, long way from the disastrous situation it's in 1989. I think this country has huge long-term potential. The biggest challenge is we're in a global world, and you have to be competitive. No country is an island, even if it is an island. You've got to be competitive, and that means you've got to be open, and you've got to be efficient. And I think that we're on the way there. And if we can keep going in that direction, that this country is just going to go up and up.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
as a long-time banker, I deal in numbers and facts and documents. But at my advanced age, as I get older, I'm taking a more philosophical view. And we all have to get together, move forward. We have the capacity to think through and get solutions. That's why one of my favorite quotations, even when I was president and CEO of banks or investment companies, I repeat Socrates, the secret to change and progress is not to focus on fighting the old, but to focus on building the new. So we should, all the events of the past, you can say, in the Japanese war, although still at war, Filipinos, these are patriotic Filipinos, had to serve the Japanese government. Jose Laurel, Benigno and Aquino, Claro and Recto. Aquino was the National Assembly Speaker, Laurel the President, Recto was in affairs. But right after that, historical reading, they talk about them as collaborators. But after a while, they became great politicians. The son of Benigno Aquino became a senator, his widow became president, and that has been forgotten. Martial law, that's too long ago. There's nothing we can do about it now, whether you agree with it or not. We must put it behind us and move forward. So we should all get together. And I think one of the reasons the campaign of the BBM was so successful is he offered hope. The man in the informal area, settlement area doesn't understand. Investors will come in, we'll have more jobs, etc. But when you tell them there is hope, because we are united, they understand that. It's like, I'm sure the ladies will pardon me, it's like cosmetics. Cosmetics sells because it gives you the hope of being beautiful. And so unity helps because it gives you hope. And, I went to Canada, stayed there a while, but I always intended to come back, and I'm back because, again, patriotism was mentioned. We are still Filipinos, and this country has great potential. And I'm really hopeful that the new president-elect will unite us, and that we should also respond and be united and move this country forward.
Well, the challenge that our country is facing is bigger than any individual challenge. And therefore, in the long run, we should think of the interests of our country more than the interests of each individual. After all, what happens to the country affects all of us.
That's why I said we should.
With that note, we can now conclude this.
Well said. And before we part, let me just announce that the Kapihan Salon Hotel, in cooperation with the Kapihan and Social Media Broadcasters of Filipinas Incorporated, will be a regular thing every Monday here at Manila Hotel, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So we are inviting not only conventional media reporters, but of course, as the organization says, this is Kapihan and Social Media Broadcasters of Filipinas. Please spread the word, and if you're more interested about the organization, we have trainings offered for free for those who would like to transcend from social media bloggers into traditional media and so on and so forth. This coming, the next Kapihan, which is supposed to be June 6, we'll be skipping that, Senator, because we have our first Bamboo Summit at Dimaras from June 6 to June 8, and the next Kapihan will be on June 13. So we would like to invite everybody, and we'll send you the advisories through your emails, through your cell phones, and all other ways that we can inform you in advance about the next topic that we're going to discuss. So, maraming salamat sa lahat, thank you very much, and see you on June 13 here at Manila Hotel.
May gusto ko sabihin.
as the new administration to embark on an economic roadmap to uplift the economy as well as the people's health, which were devastated by the pandemic, there should be a backdrop on rule of law and constitutionalism, as well as protection of human rights and respect for legitimate dissent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, my friends.
Yes, sir. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat. See you on June 30.